Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom with Next TMT Talks here for our midweek edition with our partners at Media Play News. In today's episode, Peacock joins the YouTube Premium flock. Will it fly high with its new friends? DAZN gets further into the complicated business of regional sports networks. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association isn't quite dead yet. Maybe it could be its own little Monty Python skit at this point. And signs that perhaps Paramount may have gotten more political than was useful for its brand, though you can't tell that from the newest additions to 60 Minutes staff. With all that, Daniel, how about the DAZN thing? You know, it's interesting because the regional sports networks, and we should call them the rezones, because RSNs, you know, if DAZN can call itself DAZN, DAZN, RSN should be rezone or something, because those things have been in free fall since about, 2017, when Disney started to sold them off in 2019 when they sold to Fox, and then Fox had to unload a whole bunch of them to the suckers over at Sinclair. And that was a long running
$10 million, $10 billion.
10 billion, not billion. A lot of money.
Yeah.
That seemed like a good idea in 2007 and a less good idea in 2019, it turns out, with the collapse of the cable business, and particularly for expensive basic tier sports that only reach the hardcore fans. And so what's DAZN doing? It has made its living, not just in the United States, but in many other territories, focused on sports first as a virtual programming provider.
Yeah, lots of football, European style, and fighting sports, boxing matches, etc. A lot of pay-per-view events, and etc.
Yeah.
In the United States, they haven't been that influential. They haven't, mass market level, haven't cracked it.
They're only like a couple percent of the market or something, if that. I mean, it's tiny, right?
What they're trying to do now is increase that through a relationship through the NBA, or they're, in the words of people close to their latest dealings, auditioning. In case you haven't followed it, Main Street Sports, which was formerly Bally Sports, or I guess Main Street was formerly Diamond Sports, which operated Bally Sports, which turned into FanDuel Sports. A lot of rebranding, but it was in
every case, the ship was sinking. Let's just be clear.
For several years,
like whatever you call the boat, it's you can only see the end of it because it's going down.
It was the biggest. It was Sinclair's operation. They brought it from Fox amid the big Disney deal that you described earlier about 10 years ago. As part of it, Fox broke it off and sold it to Sinclair. Another very savvy Rupert Murdoch move. Say what you will about him.
Fox didn't sell it. Disney did. Disney could not, with its ESPN holdings, take the RSNs as part of the deal. And I think it actually was conveyed as part of the $71 billion deal. But then they immediately had to divest, and they divested at a nice chunk of change, actually, for what it was.
But Rupert Murdoch,
Sinclair,
he knew these things were not going to hold their value. They were very expensive at the time. So Sinclair bought them for $10 billion. And it was
the real issue, but we should be clear, the real issue was not that they wouldn't hold their value, is they wouldn't hold their place on the basic tier of cable providers at a time when all the cable providers are trying to hold off cord cutting by taking the most expensive, least watched bits and pushing them up the ladder. So
Comcast
is the prime
example. Comcast will not sell a basic package if it can really help it with our RSN channel in it, because it drives up the price of the basic tier. You're trying to get cheaper and ward off cord cutting, and those channels undermine that objective. Anyway, so Bally Sports was branded there with a deal with who owned the Bally brand at the time? Was a Las Vegas entity?
Well, it was a Las Vegas casino company,
right?
And that's gone through a few owners, and I don't know where Bally's. There's not a Bally's on the Strip anymore, I don't believe, or maybe there is, but it's a lesser casino. But it was a big dice roll.
Sinclair set up a subsidiary, Diamond Sports Group. Diamond Sports Group carved out a branding deal for its regional sports networks. There were a lot of them. There were Major League Baseball.
Let's get to DAZN here, because this is history.
I'm getting there. So There's NHL teams, there's NBA teams. Well, don't slow me down. They go bankrupt in March of 2023, finally emerge from bankruptcy in late 2024, after losing a bunch of teams and lowering fees. That doesn't work. It still goes under last spring, and you've got 9 NBA teams that are out for regional sports network. They have no place to broadcast their games.
Same thing happened to Major League Baseball teams too, and hockey teams, right? I mean, it was all those guys, not so much the NFL, but all the other 3 of the big 4 and lesser sports are just sort of set loose in the wild, saying,
right,
things are go be with over. God, you know.
Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, is telling them, hold on for one year. I'm going to set up a collective hub for streaming local rights. If your games aren't on national TV, they'll be on this hub. Give me till the 27, 28 season. In the meantime, carve out a short-term deal. So you've got that backdrop for a bunch of teams. At the same time, you've got the world champion New York Knicks and the New York Nets,
Brooklyn Nets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They're not New York, baby. They're across the river.
They're so relevant that I forgot that.
Yes.
Yes Network, which controls, I think, the Knicks, and MSG controls the Knicks, and Yes controls the Nets.
And
they're strapped too. They agreed the teams agreed last year to let their respective RSNs lower their fees so they could stay out of bankruptcy. They launched a joint venture called Gotham Sports Network. Everybody hated it because the technology was so shitty. Finally, DAZN approached them and said, hey, listen, not for nothing, but close to it. We'll take over the technology and handle those channels and make them sing. Just give them to us. So the Yes Network and MSG Networks agreed to let the Yankees and the New York Islanders and New York Rangers, Buffalo Sabres, all these channels.
Not the Buffalo Sabres, not the Sabres. That's all the other end of the state.
No, they're part of it.
Really? Wow.
This I know.
Wow. Okay.
So they're all going to this partnership with DAZN, and DAZN is very close to signing at least 5 of the 7 dissident teams, or maybe 7 of the 9, I forget the math, but a bunch of teams that were left refugees from the Bally Sports collapse. So those will be short-term deals. If Bally will wind up with 9 or 10 teams for the NBA, if they do a good job this year, they manage the technology well, they uphold their end of the sales end and produce the revenue, then ostensibly when Adam Silver sets up this hub, instead of ESPN or YouTube, you'll have DAZN being the primary technology partner. And that's where the money would come in, and the big foothold in the U.S. would come. You've got DAZN managing a big NBA contract.
This is going on at a time when a bunch of those teams in baseball ended up, Rob Manfred is the commissioner of Major League Baseball, is trying to create and get everybody in Major League Baseball into a league-owned system. Right. And I'm going, good luck with that, because there's no way the Dodgers are going to say yes. I can't imagine them, and the Cubs, which owns its own sports network, and the Yankees would say sure or yes in the case of the Yankees Entertainment.
Yeah, the Dodgers are being paid $8 billion over 25 years. The Lakers also have the most lucrative regional sports network deal.
They have theirs, and they're both backed by the same billionaire, Mark Walter, who, interestingly enough, is now being questioned about some self-dealing between some insurance components of his vast Guggenheim empire and other parts of it by authorities, which is
time to MAGA up, Walt. Make a little donation. Everything will be
right. Yeah. Mark, it might be time to make some new friends, though I suspect he may know who to call already.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting time. But both the Lakers and the Dodgers have 2 of the most lucrative local sports contracts in the history of God. I don't think anybody else has got anything like this, at least in this country. Though if the Dallas Cowboys were able to cut their own deal, I guarantee you they'd have something like this, right? In the NFL. The NFL doesn't do that. It's all collective action. But
yeah, I think Manfred had a horrible relationship with Sinclair.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and so he
That
kind
that
of
breakup was not pretty, man. Ooh,
he's been trying to do this for years, but
yeah.
it looks like it's a little bit more straight ahead for Adam Silver. For one thing, the local rights, and I think you were talking about this last year yourself, that local rights in baseball are more meaningful. There are more games. They're a bigger
Oh
portion of the
yeah,
overall TV pie.
absolutely. It's 162 games plus preseason plus whatever happens in the postseason. So much more content, so much more shoulder content. The radio and TV around that constant drumbeat 6 days a week. I mean, they only get like 4 months, like a day off, like 6 times in the six months of the regular season. So
Right.
there's programming, weather permitting, every day, and lots of it for whoever is carrying that. And it is so dramatically different than other sports in that regard. It fills a big chunk of the season. The season fills a big chunk of the calendar, et cetera, et cetera.
So in the
So
case of the
it's
NBA, it's
different.
the local rights aren't quite as important. It's the
Right.
national, that $76 billion deal that
Hmm.
Silver carved out that everybody's really happy with. And
Yeah.
so we'll have a cooperation.
You mentioned to me that DAZN recently bought ViewLift. Friend of the show, Rick Allen, was the founder of that company and has long done work. He said to me once, he said, it's important to remember these local TV deals are the second or third biggest check that these franchises get.
Yeah.
And they're really meaningful. And again, if all of a sudden, as you describe here, you've got 10 franchises counting on that check to come in to pay their players and their workers and everything else, that's a problem. That's a problem for the leagues. It's a problem for the commissioners. That's part of why this matters so much.
Yeah, you
So,
can't replace the fees that cable and satellite companies were paying.
not in basic cable when everybody was paying for it and 20% were watching it. No, there's nothing like it.
They're trying to cobble together, in the case of DAZN, I hear the zone.
Doesn't.
Yeah, I tend to be phonetic about this stuff. They are paying between $8 million and $20 million a season, depending on the market size. So
Okay.
it's not terrible money for the teams. I guess
That's like double the Marlins budget for players.
I guess it's and it must be a little bit deficit spending for Dawson's got what's his name?
DAZN.
DAZN. They've got a billionaire backer, and they've got Saudi
Right.
public money, public
PIF
investment fund
money.
money.
Yes. Yes.
But they also lost close to $1 billion in 2024. So
Well, that's 2024. If you're tilting this thing up across multiple territories, acquiring sports rights, acquiring deals, I'm not surprised they lost some money. The question is not whether they lost money, it's whether they can get to a sustainable level. Now, if you are doing this with the help of the nearly bottomless pockets of the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which sees entertainment as a diversifying opportunity for them. And
name's
that's
Dan
why they're
Kushner.
getting, yeah.
Trying to get down that. Seems like it would help.
But they would see that as, yeah, Dan, you and Jared, you're tight. You're
No,
tight.
is it just Josh's brother? The
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
good to be.
Jared got handed $2 billion, his investment company, to invest, but now they're obviously part of the deal to buy Electronic Arts,
Right.
$55 billion deal to buy Electronic Arts. And in between his negotiations over Middle East peace, Jared's got a few other things rolling. But they have invested heavily in entertainment, esports, video games, live golf, which has not worked out. Their Saudi soccer league, which pays big dollars for people to go roast in the sun, but it's still got some big name players over there. And they're going to have the World Cup. They're going to have the World Cup in 2034.
And I hear restrictions that kept their government from developing nuclear weapons and stockpiling them. They've been as Brendan Carr would say, deleted. It's good to be in the top end of the administration, or related by
Well,
marriage.
that's up in the air now too, because it has to go through Congress, and there are definitely folks who are not going to be excited about a nuclear deal with anybody outside of Israel in the Middle East. So that'll be a whole different conversation that is
I hope so.
far, far from the things that we tend to focus on. That being said, more interesting, I think, is speaking of sports rights, Peacock has signed a deal to expand its relationship with YouTube. And now Peacock Premium, their ad-free component of the Peacock service, is going to be not folded into, but built into YouTube Premium, which has been kind of okay, you don't have to watch ads. And there's some other benefits. Basically, you don't have to watch ads when you watch YouTube. Okay, that's something. The ads are kind of annoying and you can skip them after 20 seconds or something. But having Peacock in there means, to me, what's interesting about this is that YouTube Premium, which has been around since 2014 in one variant or another, they started out with just a subscription music channel, ad-free subscription music, and then they did ad-free all their millions and millions and millions of program bits that weren't music, and then they split them and renamed them and all that. But now it's YouTube Premium and YouTube Music, and 125 million subscribers share between those two services, and YouTube doesn't break it out. 125 million, pretty good sized operation, right? 3 times Peacock.
Wait, Premium has 125 million
subscribers
combined with music. Between the two of them,
with YouTube Music, between the two of them, they have. And then what the split is, they have not delineated. But in 2025, it's been over a year, so it's probably bigger than that now. But the bottom line, literal bottom line, is they've got at least 125 million subscribers, which is way more than Peacock with 48 million, despite that legendary February and then a really great last quarter that finally, after 6 years and 24 quarters, got them in the black. So they finally get there. So I think it's a really important deal, and I think it makes YouTube Premium much more valuable too, because it now has content that old people recognize, like Law and Order, and major sports operations like more NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball.
If the whole YouTube organism is moving into connected TV, and you buy a premium connected TV brand, or integrated, I should say, that's meaningful. Yeah. It's meaningful.
That's meaningful. Both. It also, for some of us, I kind of go, I know who might be interested in NBC Universal when it spins off.
No kidding. Yeah, it's among a series of seemingly technologically savvy moves. I mean, you look at all the moves they're doing with the Peacock app, and how they're getting into verticals, and how they're making it kind of sticky and an experience in and of itself beyond connected TV, which is what it is. It's it's competing with TikTok and all those. We've discussed this. And now they're doing this. It just seems like somebody different is driving the bus over there these days. It seems.
Just doing, and not only doing verticals. I think the smart part about that was not just doing verticals, but doing a thing that NBC Universal has a demonstrated capability in, which is unscripted reality programming. So Love Island was an insanely popular show this summer and helped that Peacock quarter. They do this stuff very well in the Bravoverse. I mean, they got that stuff down.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they're just like, we're doing microdramas now. It feels like it's exactly kind of organic to the brand in that way. Agree.
It's not hard. Like, just imagining, a Love Island equivalent in verticals that's even racier.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't have to worry about the broadcast and or cable standards, or even outtakes from that crazy show or one like it. That with Andy Cohen commentary or something. That could be gigantic, and it becomes this thing that sticks people into these big reality franchises between seasons. So I just think that's a really huge opportunity. So you're right. I mean, they're doing some clever stuff. They're getting a lot smarter. It really felt like for the first several years of the Peacock launch, that was a bird that was definitely ground bound, right?
Right.
And now it can get off the ground and fly a little bit. And I think having Google's uplift onto you is going to make a huge difference, personally.
Yeah. You look at Google TV and how integrated now YouTube is into the connected TV part of our lives. I mean, like it's kind of indistinguishable. They surface aggressively YouTube above all else. It feels that way, at least. And I fall right for it. It's very sticky for me. And if you have,
and given the viewership, which is the most of any provider of video content, it's clearly sticky for hundreds of millions of people around the world. I mean, I have heard estimates by people like Laura Martin that if you spun YouTube out, somehow were able to separate it out of Alphabet, it would be worth $500 billion. Now, that's a back of the envelope estimate, but that's a pretty big company, and that is way bigger than Netflix, right? Which is a market cap of, I don't know, 250 billion or something like that. And never mind everybody else, So that would be big.
I mean, it's become like a cottage industry taking data from Nielsen's The Gauge and recrunching it and putting it into the graphics.
Right.
But for what it's worth, the latest gauge is out, and YouTube was up to 14% of all consumption, almost 13.8%. Yeah,
that's up a couple of percentage points in just like a year and a half. I mean, and that sounds like not very much, but if you figure out all the players spending tens of billions of dollars for programming and attention and all that stuff, and all the deals they have, and all the reach and experience they have, and the marketing they spend, and it keeps growing by another couple of points over a couple of years in a hotly contested pie, that's a lot.
It's the month of May, and most broadcasts, primetime TV is, the seasons have run their course.
No, that's when they wrap it up, because it's a ratings month. I mean, so they will wrap up their spring season with their cliffhangers and all that.
All of broadcast was 19.4%. That's not too far from 13.8%.
No, it's not.
Shouting range.
Really not. Yeah, that is getting a little uncomfortable range is what it is. So that's something. But what would these folks do without this? It's a little bit like, what would the Penske Media guys do without the Golden Globes? I was going to
ask you, do you believe in ghosts coming back from the dead, The Walking Dead?
Well, yeah.
I'm mixing my monster allegories here, but
you're definitely lurching into something probably a little bit off, but
Mama's Boy Jay killed the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. I thought all those damning stories about how corrupt they are and how they're racist and their trade show is corrupt, that I read in Variety all throughout 2020 in the run up to Jay Penske buying the Golden Globes. I thought
had a possibly depressed, I mean, the lawsuit that was filed by former members of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association alleges that there was a secret effort to kind of pile on and further depress the value of the HFPA and the Golden Globes with the boycott, helped encourage the boycott to further drive down values and allow it to be acquired by Penske, Todd Bowley. There's some complicated ownership stuff here that hurts my head, but Jay's the smart kind of guy that can figure all that stuff out and leverage things out the wazoo. And again, I just want to, I have nothing but admiration for the vertically integrated, maybe not legal monopoly, but that is certainly alleged in the lawsuit. But that vertical integration is quite remarkable, and it is all built on milking the bottomless teat of Hollywood vanity, which is the award shows. And boy, that thing just keeps giving. The award shows write about the awards campaigns that are being run for the Golden Globes and the Oscars and the Emmys, and they do all this stuff. And now on a year-round basis, he acquired many, though not all, but many of the outlets that cover the space in a business way. And they all now have significant, if they didn't to begin with, all like IndieWire wasn't really covering awards until Jay bought them. And then they were starting to cover the Grammys. I mean, the Emmys and stuff.
It felt like hardcore vertical integration in kind of a dirty way. And a lot of people pushed back at it. They were being pushed into, you want this award? Pay this money. They were being pushed
a
into
little bit like a shakedown, sure.
Expensive sponsorship packages. It's bad enough.
Well, there was some stuff tied to the Golden Globes in particular that was complicated. They even bought the American Pavilion at the Cannes Film Festival. That's something. That's interesting. But that being said, you're right. There was a bit of a feeling of, nice little awards campaign you got there. I hate to have anything bad happen to it.
Somebody with the HFPA, they're the kind of people that respond to billboards.
Billboards.
Got your award show?
No, billboards that they see out the window of their 5-star hotel with room service. That's the kind of billboard that helps move those guys. I mean, Pia Zadora's campaign, the laughable campaign for her purchased by her wealthy husband, was the most notorious example, but there's plenty of other issues.
Saul Goodman is hauling him into court. Yeah, of course we'll get a settlement.
Yeah. So the real interesting bit there is just that intimation that there may have been some secret campaign to help push along a boycott to, hamstring the organization and put it in a place where it needed to sell at a lower price. All this needs to be taken with a grain of, maybe more than a grain of salt, maybe a giant block of salt. It's like, 3 years later. And, some of this is, we didn't get all the promised lifetime benefits. We were promised to vote for it. They said, yes, but you have to do this. And this is like terrible for work, so on and so forth. But that being said, it's back. I'm not going to not going to wait a long time. Of course, the Penske people have denied all allegations and said it's the latest in the absurd.
Well, it's absurd
history of
amount
an absurd
of time
organization
to wait to do something about it. But
well, I mean, you could imply that we were promised lifetime voting rights and some other stuff, and that was then conditioned on things that were not mentioned in the front end, designed to make it so we couldn't take advantage of those, and so that's bad faith and fraud, which is what it implies, and that can take a little while. It's been 3 years though, so it can take a little while. All that being said, we'll let the courts sort that out. I am glad, for what it's worth, that Jay's employing a lot of my former colleagues at multiple publications where I've done work there, and I've always found him a congenial and clever young man. He's annoyingly handsome and married to a former Victoria's Secret model. Other than that, and he's the son of a billionaire. Other than that,
life is terrible.
He has a hard life. It's really hard.
Yeah, get to the point where you're getting sued a lot. That's where we all want to be,
I think when you get to a certain level, stuff's going to happen, no matter what you do. And, some behaviors may lead to more of them than less, but some of that is you're just a target.
So speaking of lawsuits and stuff happening, I've been binging on analysis of Paramount's decision to head to the locker room and litigate this thing and close the merger with Warner Brothers.
I'm not sure that metaphor works. They didn't really go to the locker room, did they?
Yeah, they kind of said they didn't. Instead of launching a drive and trying to play the game out through what might be or might not be a temporary restraining order. About Paramount, a couple of interesting stories. One was from Semaphore, their media newsletter on Monday. They talked to some executive insiders at Paramount who had expressed a little bit of contrition and remorse for getting so in bed with the Trump administration on the merger. Is
that contrition or just remorse? Because remorse is, it makes my life more difficult.
I think
contrition is, I'm really sorry we did that.
Yeah, I think, I think you can have it covers a lot of bases. I think I'm going to stick with that, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I know our user base is running for their Websters right now. So, also at the same time, irked that the process has been so political. Also reading, which is kind of ironic, they made it that way. Also reading Sharon Waxman in the New York Times, which we discussed. Kind of a hard to follow story, kind of diffuse, but there is one through line. It's not, what you think that it's not really so much about the antitrust issues. It's about CNN. That's kind of true. Behind the scenes, the lawyers and executives she talked to say that that's what's at stake here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the asset that's in play, even if you can't, under antitrust law, extract that directly. But that's the asset. That's the football. But the football is not necessarily the thing that matters in the antitrust allegations.
Right. The mechanics run around or based on what you just said, the antitrust, but the motivating factor remains the network. And there's good reason. You look at Bari Weiss's latest moves at CBS. Who was it? Douthat? Douthat?
Ross Douthat.
Yeah.
Who's a conservative, thoughtful guy. He's a conservative Christian, but thoughtful. New York Times columnist, talks a lot about. He brings an interesting perspective from somebody who's a conservative, I believe Catholic, who's got some skepticism, say, toward the Damascene conversion of our only vice president to a conservative Catholicism over the last several years, as detailed in the
he's hardly MAGA,
vice president's
but
new book.
He spends a lot of time critiquing liberalism.
Yeah, I mean, he's conservative. He's just not particularly MAGA, because MAGA,
and he fits right in. I think
more heterodox, I think, than that.
For a New York Times that's trying to be diverse, that's trying not to be all, left wing, I think he fits right in there. Yeah. I don't know how well he fits an investigative news program with a storied past.
But you forget, back in the day, 40 years ago, they had a kind of a point counterpoint kind of thing going on that was later amusingly, parodied by Saturday Night Live with Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. But it was based on stuff that was on 60 Minutes and I think it was point counterpoint. But the whole point was they were going back and forth. And then
it was the Dan Aykroyd would call Jane Curtin, "Jane, you ignorant slut." At the end, they'd get up and they'd hug or shake hands. It was very professional, cordial.
Yeah.
We're all those moments in our political discourse now. Also hired by Bari Weiss was Sebastian Junger, the author of The Perfect Storm.
Perfect Storm, and formerly an incredibly handsome man who's now looking a little bit older, but an interesting writer. He's a beautiful writer. I mean, he's just an extraordinary writer and journalist. He later was in Afghanistan at a forward base of operations in, I want to say Samarkand, but a fairly notorious base with Tim Heatherling was the
Restrepo. They made a documentary that
Restrepo, yeah. And I mean, that's above and beyond. That's Dan Rather level journalism correspondent. They made extraordinary documentary. Restrepo is the one. Like, that's a dude who's the real thing, as far as I'm concerned. He's the real thing.
He has been assiduously apolitical. He's tried very hard not to have a brand stick to him. And that kind of makes sense to me. Brought in, it's the MAGA curious stuff that Weiss does. Anyway, interesting read from our friend Rick Ellis, who I've been tracking a little more closely these days. He talked to some recent CBS News dissidents who were trying to offer some thoughtful analysis what drives Bari Weiss. And I do think that she has, this is a quote, drank the anti-deep state conspiracy Kool-Aid. She's really into that stuff. She gets informed by a lot of online far-right media, and she sees stuff through that lens. And
I actually think Douthat is not a bad fit for the free press's, again, somewhat complicated heterodox approach to a lot of stuff. They, have plenty to make fun of in liberal circles, but they find some things to make fun of in conservative circles too. And Douthat gets there sometimes. He absolutely gets there sometimes.
Yeah, this is a lightweight either. None of these people are necessarily, in and of themselves, if everything was kind of kept the way it was, bad additions. They're interesting additions, but to sort of get the place and start over with them, it seems strange. But
well, they're not starting over. I think they still have 4 of the previous correspondents, and they lost 3, I believe. Well, 4 if you count Anderson Cooper. So maybe they add 1 or 2 more. I mean, I think the real issue is do any of these guys know how to put out a TV show with a cadence that 60 Minutes has, the level of in-depth, not perfect. They definitely stepped in it on some of their projects over the years, but the aspiration and the expectation was through the roof. And now it is very much a different animal that is no longer in its own little world doing its thing. So we'll see how that plays out. I actually found the new hires, certainly younger, is, like I said, that's a straight win as far as I'm concerned. So that's he's the real deal.
We'll see. It's not a straight correlation making
Right.
documentary films and weekly TV segments, but they did need to get younger. It was
so to speak.
Group. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, they got younger with Sebastian.
The rating
different kind of younger, but
I don't think he's young anymore.
No, he's like 60 now, but I mean, he was like, he had model looks when he was a younger writer, and when he did The Perfect Storm, I mean, that is a tremendous book that became a tremendous movie, but it's evocation of a community and of what happened in the loss of that boat and of that storm, actually that collision of storms in an area that's not that far from where I finished high school. Pretty remarkable work. So
yeah, he went into the history of American fishing in the North Atlantic, and it was a good read for sure.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
So anyway,
and
yeah, he's good that way. So we'll see how that translates to pure TV, not a year's posting at a forward base and FBO constantly under shelling. Perhaps it'll be less PTSD, and
we're going to find out what happens to 60 Minutes a lot sooner than we are this merger, I suspect. So,
yeah, exactly. Anyway, with that, we probably ought to wrap this puppy up. I am David Bloom, co-founder of Next TMT, and this here podcast, Next TMT Talks, with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. You can find this podcast in several places. We are, first of all, grateful to our partners over at Media Play News for this midweek edition. You can find both this and our Sunday/Monday morning podcast and access to our twice a week newsletter, Next TMT, as in technology, media, and telecom, at nexttmt.com. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Love those comments. Sponsors, we are getting ready for IBC in about 7 weeks. If you want to take part in our daily show coverage of one of the biggest broadcasting conferences in the world,
your parents would be proud of you.
Yes, your parents would be proud, and Dan and I would think that's cool. Anyway, with that, this is David Bloom and Daniel Frankel saying over and out.